aspects of the repeal of the Legacy Act. But the Policy Exchange report this week, and as the newspapers have stated this morning, raises some significant concerns about the repeal of Section 46 and 47 in that Act. Can I urge him to return to the previous cross-party position that we have to block compensation payments to terrorists such as Gerry Adams?
Well, I have indeed seen that report, and the problem is that the approach set out in the Legacy Act, in this respect and many others, has been found to be unlawful. Unlawful. Now, of course, as the last government did, we will continue to see if we can find a lawful way of dealing with the issue that he has identified, and that work will continue.
Gregory Cup.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Secretary of State agree that the job of the Commission in helping people to deal with the past is made much more difficult when we have incidents like when the Sinn Féin First Minister Michelle O'Neill reprehensively spoke and attended a commemoration of 3 IRA terrorists who died when the bomb they were transporting through County Londonderry in 1971 exploded prematurely, killing them rather than the innocent people they intended to murder, and now the possibility of former Sinn Féin leader and terrorist Gerry Adams may be about to receive compensation?
I say to the honourable gentleman that, as I alluded to a moment ago, the process of reconciliation and coming to terms with the past is a difficult and itself a troubled process. And lots of people have been on a journey, and we need to continue to see that journey followed. People will express their views about the stance that different people have taken, but I welcome, since he mentioned the First Minister, the fact that for the first time she attended the Remembrance Sunday commemorations.
I've not looked at the Alex Bogart, Shadow Secretary of State.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to return to the question just raised by my right honourable friend, the former Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. The fact of the matter is that in the case of Gerry Adams, when the previous government passed its legislation, the Labour Party was in favour of the amendments made in another place, which ruled out compensation to people like Gerry Adams and others similarly detained in the 1970s. Why has the government now changed its position?
It is the courts that have found those clauses to be unlawful. And the fact of the matter is that the last government passed legislation to enable terrorists to get immunity. The last government passed legislation to deny people in Northern Ireland the right to bring civil claims, including against terrorists. The Conservative Party has never apologised for doing both of those things. It's about time that they did.
Let's return to the matter of Gerry Adams. The Secretary of State, and I'm sorry to say I must correct the Secretary of State. The High Court found that, those provisions in the Legacy Act were unlawful. But it is well within the Secretary of State's power to appeal that judgment. He has dropped that appeal. And I don't wish to teach the Secretary of State to suck constitutional eggs, but he will know full well that it is also within the sovereign power of this Parliament to give legal basis to the Carltona doctrines which have been in place since the 1940s. Or would he rather pay compensation to Gerry Adams and people like him?
Nobody wants to see that, but the Supreme Court judgment the Supreme Court judgment which ruled that the interim custody orders following internment were not lawfully put in place, in which the Carltona principle was much discussed, was in 2020. The last government did nothing about that for 3 years until they belatedly accepted an amendment in the House of Lords, which has now been found to be unlawful. It is a complex and a difficult question. The last government found it difficult, but we will continue to follow the same path that they did to see whether it's possible to discover a legal means of dealing with the problem he has identified.
Chris Vince.
Number 5, Mr. Speaker.
Minister. Secretary.
With permission, Mr Speaker, I will answer questions 5, 7, 9 and 10 together. The Government's mission is to encourage growth in Northern Ireland through increased investment, job creation and higher living standards. The Government is working closely with the Northern Ireland Executive to develop Invest 2035, the UK's modern industrial strategy.
Chris Vins.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and may I thank the Secretary of State for his response. Northern Ireland's economy has strong and dynamic sectors, from agri-food to aerospace, to shipbuilding to cyber-security. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that actually Northern Ireland has a vital part to play in the industrial strategy?
It certainly does, and my honourable friend alludes to a number of the great strengths of the Northern Ireland economy. The deal with Harland and Wolff I referred to earlier is another sign of the Government's commitment, and of course the Northern Ireland economy has access to both the EU and the UK market.
Alan Gamble.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Does the Secretary of State share my optimism that UK Government funding for all 4 Northern Ireland city and growth deals confirmed in the autumn provides a great basis for all of Northern Ireland to generate growth and opportunities?
I certainly do, and I've been greatly impressed by the commitment of those involved in developing the growth deals to invest in boosting economic growth in their areas.
Jane Kirkham.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Could the Secretary of State update the House on what recent discussions he's had with the Executive about steps to take to increase revenue in order to help deliver longer-term financial sustainability to help grow the economy in Northern Ireland?
I have had a number of discussions, Mr Speaker, with the Executive on that subject, and I'm pleased to see that the draft budget for next year contains a plan to raise further revenue, which will meet the £113 million requirement that was part of the budget restoration agreement. It is really important the Executive raises additional funds to meet the challenges of improving public services.
Dan Aldridge.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. There are many dynamic tech and digital companies at the vanguard of the mission for economic growth in Northern Ireland. Does the Minister agree with me that these industries are critical to Northern Ireland's economic future? And what steps are being taken by the Government to support these industries to grow to their full potential?
Well, there have already been discussions with businesses in Northern Ireland about the part they can play in the industrial strategy, but cybersecurity is a really good example of a huge strength of the Northern Ireland economy, where many companies, including from the United States of America, are investing because of the skill and expertise that is to be found there.
Saoirse Eastwell.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank the Secretary of State and the Minister for their responses so far, and indeed in one of the responses I note that Northern Ireland was highlighted as having dual market access. So on that basis, would the Secretary of State and Minister agree with me that initiatives like the Dublin-Belfast Economic Corridor in my constituency of Lagan Valley need supported so we can make the most of our economic opportunities?
I do indeed think that the Belfast Economic Corridor is a really good thing. We support it, and I look forward to seeing it develop and succeed.
Jamie Stowe.
Mr Speaker, thank you. Agriculture is really important to the economy of Northern Ireland. In Scotland, we breed excellent bulls, but it's very hard to sell them and get them into Northern Ireland because of the regulations and red tape, and vice versa for Irish bulls coming to Scotland. Could I ask the Secretary of State to see if we could make it a bit easier for farmers on both sides?
I will look into the matter that the honourable gentleman raised, and I will come back to him.
Jim Allister.
This week the Prime Minister has spoken of the unbridled economic opportunities in developing AI. But of course, it is not an unbridled opportunity for Northern Ireland, because instead of living under British regulations that affect the AI, we live under much more restrictive EU regulations. So when would the Secretary of State move to release Northern Ireland from the restrictions of foreign jurisdiction under the EU?
Well, I say to the honourable gentleman, the substantive provisions of the EU AI Act do not currently apply in Northern Ireland, would only apply following an agreement in the Withdrawal Agreement Joint Committee, and any decision would be subject to the democratic safeguard mechanisms in Schedule 6B of the Northern Ireland Act 1998.
David Mundell.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In his Union Connectivity review, Lord Hendy, now a minister in this government, identified that upgrading the A75 would have significant economic benefits, not just for Northern Ireland, but for the whole of the United Kingdom. There was another fatal accident on that road in my constituency last week. So will the Secretary of State join with the Secretary of State for Scotland to put pressure on the Scottish Government to finally move on upgrading this vital economic route?
It is indeed a vital economic route, and like the honourable member, I look forward to seeing it improved, not least in the interests of safely as quickly as possible.
Sammy Wilson.
Question number 6, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The updated EU General Product Safety Regulations largely formalises how businesses are already operating in the UK, and the majority of businesses have adapted to continue trading within the UK and with the EU. In December, the Government published guidance for businesses on the application of the regulation in Northern Ireland. The Secretary of State has this week met with ministerial colleagues and will keep this under review.
Sammy Wilson.
As a result of these EU regulations, thousands of consumers in Northern Ireland are denied goods from GB, and rather than adapt, businesses in GB have simply abandoned the Northern Ireland market. At the same time, this week, DEFRA has banned the import of meat from Germany, where there's been foot and mouth disease outbreak, but has not extended that ban to Northern Ireland because of the Northern Ireland Protocol. While the EU protects its market, the UK appears to have abandoned the internal market of its own country. What is the Secretary of State going to do to redress this?
This government is absolutely committed to ensuring the smooth flow of goods across the UK internal market. We understand under GPSR that for many companies they've adapted easily, it's more difficult. The Secretary of State has met with the Minister of Business this week about further guidance and insurance and is continuing to do so.
Presley Fox.
Question number 8.
Minister.
There are many pressures on businesses that we are constantly assessing and talking with businesses about. Job creation in Northern Ireland, the member is right to raise. It's a priority for this government, and we are supporting businesses in many ways, including through Invest NI's fund for small businesses and through directly supporting job seekers through funding for employment support schemes.
Ashley Fox.
Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful for the warm welcome. How does the Minister expect businesses in Northern Ireland to grow and invest in their communities, given they have to pay the enormous tax increases imposed by the Chancellor?
Minister.
Even after accounting for employer national insurance contribution impacts, the Office of Budget Responsibility expects level of real wages will raise by 3% now. Raising the revenue to fill the £22 billion black hole requires difficult decisions, but they will result in improved public services, which is good for all people in Northern Ireland.
Lawful.
Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State.
I welcome the industry-led deal that will see Navantia UK purchase Harland and Wolff's 4 shipyards in the UK, including Belfast. The government has worked closely with Navantia UK to secure the future of the yards, the Fleet Solid Support Programme, and around 1,000 jobs across the UK.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does my right honourable friend share my optimism that now the future of the Harland and Wolff yard has been secured, the yard itself will be able to secure future orders?
I certainly do, and that is one of the great benefits of the commercial agreement that's been reached by Navantia to buy Harland and Wolff, and the adjustments that were made to the contract to ensure that the Fleet Solid Support ships could go ahead. This is a great facility, and it is open for business, including for other orders.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Minister, one of my companies in my constituency of Strangford is one of the people who will suffer because of the administration of Harland and Wolff. In particular, this small family firm, and I won't mention it all for Hansard, will lose £500,000 of money. Now, the impact upon them and others is quite catastrophic. Can I ask the Minister what can be done to help those companies through the administration of Harland and Wolff who will find themselves either not able to trade in the future or losing entirely?
I do recognise the concerns which the honourable gentleman has raised. This is the product of the failure of the old Harland and Wolff, but it now falls to Navantia to decide which of those invoices they wish to pay, and they will want to secure a relationship with suppliers who will be contributing to the Fleet Solid Support Ship programme.
Right, before we come to Prime Minister's questions, can I welcome in the gallery the Speaker of the Assembly of the Republic of Albania, Mrs. Alicia Spiripoli. Right, let us start with questions to Prime Minister Joshua Reynolds.
Question 1, Mr. Speaker.
Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know members across the House will want to extend our thanks to President Biden for his steadfast leadership and warmly congratulate President-elect Trump ahead of his inauguration. Mr. Speaker, in my conversation with President-elect Trump, we've underlined our shared commitment to the special relationship in the years to come. Mr. Speaker, this week we launched our AI Opportunities Action Plan, which will ensure we seize the opportunities of AI to benefit working people as part of our plan for change. That will boost productivity, transform public services, deliver £39 billion of investment and over 13,000 jobs. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Joshua Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With almost 4.5 million entries and exits in the last year, Maidenhead train station is a busy transport hub. But with crowded gate lines, flooded underpasses and a drop-off facility that isn't fit for purpose, the station needs major upgrades to give Maidenhead commuters what they deserve. So does the Prime Minister understand how Maidenhead residents face at the station, and will he commit his government to fixing these issues in this government?
Prime Minister.
Well, thank him for his question, and I'm pleased that his constituents are benefiting from the upgrades at the station, including, I think, new lifts to make the station fully accessible. The issues he raises are faced by passengers right across the country, and that is why we're bringing rail services back into public ownership, setting up Great British Railways and making ticketing simpler and fairer to ensure a better service for all passengers, including in his constituency.
Lashaba Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I recently visited Mid-Kent College, which serves my constituency of Gillingham and Rainham, and where valuable construction skills are taught to young people. However, I was also informed that the college faces significant challenges in recruiting teachers to deliver those courses. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that proper skills training and having the teachers necessary to deliver it is absolutely vital to growing our economy and building the homes we need for the future? And will he agree to set up a meeting with the relevant minister to discuss the recruitment challenges that some colleges face?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, skilling up the next generation is, of course, vital to kick-starting economic growth. And our plan for change will rebuild Britain by delivering 1.5 million new homes. That's why we've established Skills England, reforming our planning system and training the workforce. And I will ensure that she gets the meeting that she wants with the relevant minister.
We come to Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Badenoch.
Mr. Speaker, on Friday, while borrowing costs hit levels not seen since Labour was last in government, I met business owners and their employees in Chesterfield. One of them told me that his business will not exist in 4 years' time because of this government's policies. It might not even exist next year. The Prime Minister may try to blame his inheritance or blame global factors, but why should anyone trust a word he says over the businesses who are saying again and again that his budget means fewer jobs, lower growth and higher borrowing costs?
Mr. Speaker, as she knows, the global economy is experiencing volatility and higher borrowing costs. That is why it was vital that we took the tough and right decisions in the budget to get our finances back in order. We had to deal with the £22 billion black hole that they left. We made difficult cuts, raised taxes to invest in health, public services and housing, vital to stability, vital to growth. And we've got an ironclad commitment to our fiscal rules. And she will welcome, no doubt, the inflation figures from this morning. But contrast that with the party opposite. They weren't brave enough in government to take those difficult decisions. They've opposed all of our measures to stabilise the economy and promote growth. They're back to the magic money tree. She wants all the benefits of the budget, but she can't say how she's going to pay for them. They haven't changed. They're still economic vandals and fantasists. Imagine where we'd be if they were still in charge.
Mr. Speaker, just today, the British Retail Consortium says 2/3 of businesses will have to raise prices to cope with his tax hike. His Chancellor ignored all the warnings and ploughed ahead with an unprecedented borrowing spree, leaving all of us more vulnerable. Now we have businesses saying they will raise prices to cover his jobs tax. We have an energy policy that will drive up bills, and all the while we are spending more day to day on debt interest than we do on schools and universities. The Prime Minister refused to repeat his Chancellor's promise that she wouldn't come back for more. Will he now rule out any new tax rises this year?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we took the right and difficult decisions at the budget. Decisions that they did not have the courage to take, which left us in the mess in the first place. When it comes to tax, she knows very well the limits of what I can say from this dispatch box, but we have an ironclad commitment to our fiscal rules. We can't just tax our way out of the problems that they left us, which is why we put in place tough. They were howling at the spending decisions. They wouldn't take them, and we'll stick to those spending decisions, and our focus is absolutely on growth. But their record, they flatlined the economy. They flatlined the economy, a mini-budget that crashed the economy, worst cost of living crisis in living history, and they left a £22 billion black hole, not taking lessons from them on the economy.
Kemi Badenoch.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister knows very well the OBR found no such black hole. And he talks about a budget 3 years ago. The borrowing costs last week are at a 27-year high for 30-year gilts. The Chancellor is apparently promising to be ruthless in reducing spending. Let me suggest something that he should cut. There is no way that we should be giving up British territory in Chagos. He is rushing a deal which will be disastrous and which will land taxpayers with a multi-billion-pound bill. Why does the Prime Minister think British people should pay to surrender something that is already ours?
Mr. Speaker, we inherited a situation where the long-term operation of a vital military base was under threat because of legal challenges. The negotiations were started under the last government. The then Foreign Secretary came to this House to say why he was starting negotiations and what he wanted to achieve. And he said the aim was to, quote, ensure the continued effective operation of the base. That is precisely what this deal has delivered.
Mr. Speaker, there is no one he can blame for this dud deal except himself. At the budget, Labour were congratulating themselves for having the first female Chancellor, instead of ensuring the country had someone actually qualified to do the job. The Prime Minister...
I want to hear... Sorry. I want to hear the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister claims he has full confidence in the Chancellor, but the markets clearly do not. Yesterday, the Chancellor repeated her promise to have just one budget per year to provide businesses with certainty. The talk in the City is that she can't meet her fiscal rules, and there will need to be an emergency budget. So does the Prime Minister stand by the Chancellor's commitment that there will be only one budget this year?
Prime Minister.
She'll be pleased to know the Chancellor will be in place for many, many years to come. She'll outstrip them. Mr. Speaker, if we all thought the politics was about cheap points, I could criticise their chancellors, but I don't have enough time to go through all of the chancellors that they had. We have one budget, that's what we're committed to, strong fiscal rules, and we'll stick to them, unlike the party opposite.
Mr. Speaker, at a time of turmoil in the markets, the Prime Minister was distracted by the crisis around the former City Minister. What does it tell us about his judgment that yesterday he said he was saddened that his close friend resigned? This was an anti-corruption minister under criminal investigation for corruption. Mohammed Yunus, the Nobel Prize winner advising Bangladesh, said London properties gifted to the former City Minister may be proceeds of robbery. So, will the Prime Minister offer Bangladesh the full support of our National Crime Agency in ensuring that any properties bought with stolen funds are properly investigated?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the former City Minister referred herself the independent adviser. He found, as she well knows, there was no breach of the code. He knows that he found there was no wrongdoing, and the former minister fully cooperated. She referred herself a week ago Monday. I got the report yesterday, and she resigned yesterday afternoon. Compare that with the Shadow Foreign Secretary, who breached the ministerial code. Her predecessor, Bartu, ignored it. It was the adviser that then had to resign because he wasn't taken seriously, and she's now serving the leader of the opposition. What a contrast. Thank God the British public chucked them out.
Mr. Speaker, he did not answer the question about the National Crime Agency. No answer to investigating dodgy Labour ministers, just as last week he didn't want an inquiry that might expose dodgy Labour councils. The Prime Minister knowingly appointed a convicted fraudster as his Transport Secretary. The anti-corruption minister he had full confidence in only days ago resigned yesterday in disgrace. He is negotiating a secret deal to surrender British territory, and taxpayers in this country will pay for the humiliation. Now it turns out his government may write a cheque to compensate Jerry Adams. This is shameful. We left him the fastest growing economy in the G7. In just 6 months, under his leadership, it's been taxes up, borrowing up, mortgage rates up, and that's not all. Business confidence is down, jobs are down, growth is down. Can the country afford 4 more years of his terrible judgments?
Mr. Speaker, among that barrage of complete nonsense, there is one point that I need to address, because it's the Legacy Act, and it will be of real interest across the House. That Act was unfit because, well, not least because it gave immunity to hundreds of terrorists and wasn't supported by victims in Northern Ireland, nor, I believe, by any of the political parties in Northern Ireland. The court found it unlawful. We will put in place this is a serious point. We will put in place a better framework. We're working on a draft remedial order and replacement legislation, and we will look at every conceivable way to prevent these types of cases claiming damages. And it's important I say that on the record. But as for her claim and her nonsense, they crashed the economy. Mr. Speaker, I got a letter this week from a Tory voter in a Labour seat. I hope they don't mind me saying who it was. It was Liz Truss. Mr. Speaker, it wasn't written in green ink, but it might as well have been. She was complaining that saying she'd crashed the economy was damaging her reputation. It was actually crashing the economy that damaged her reputation. Mr. Speaker, what have we heard? All they've got is complaining. No defence for their sorry record. They don't even acknowledge it. No ideas, no policy. They're like a blank piece of paper, blowing hopelessly in the wind. No wonder the country put them in the bin.
Jim Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Patients in Kent are experiencing a winter crisis resulting from years of underinvestment in our NHS. Many are having to be treated on trolleys in corridors with cases of winter flu and other viruses, providing a significant challenge to local health services. What assurance can the Prime Minister offer my residents in Dartford that the reforms and extra investment set out by the Secretary of State for Health will make this inadequate care a thing of the past, and would he visit Darrant Valley Hospital in Dartford with me?
Prime Minister.
Well, thank you for raising this, and I'm deeply sorry for those receiving inadequate care in his constituency. The last government left the NHS in a critical condition, but you can't deliver growth with record waiting lists, 2.8 economically inactive. Our plan for change, investing in the NHS, diagnostic centres, and I will, of course, consider his invitation.
Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I echo the words of the Prime Minister about President Trump, and hope both his team and the team of President-elect Biden can work together to bring President-elect Trump and President Biden can work together to bring the peace in Gaza we so desperately need, so the hostages can be released, we can get the aid in and the killing can stop. Mr. Speaker, as the Honourable Member for Dartford just said, patients are suffering through the worst NHS winter crisis on record. Last month alone, 54,000 people waited more than 12 hours in A&E. Over 63,000 were stuck in ambulances for over an hour before they could even get into hospital. So there's no doubt the flu season has made the winter crisis worse. But we see these winter crises year after years of neglect of the NHS by the Conservatives. NHS leaders say we will never put an end to these winter crises unless we fix the crisis in social care. Now, I asked him this question last week and I was disappointed in his replies. I'm going to try again. Will he scrap the 3-year timetable he's given to the Casey Commission so he can fix social care this year and implement the reforms by the end of this year at the latest?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, on the talks towards a ceasefire, we are encouraged by the talks. I think the whole House would urge all to come to an agreement and have the hostages released. We all understand the absolute torture that their families are going through every single minute, every single day that this continues. So we hope that there can be progress there. In relation to the NHS, he's absolutely right. The party opposite left it on its knees. There's no point groaning. It is absolutely disgraceful that the NHS was left in the state that it was in. Absolutely disgraceful. We are investing to turn that around. We are reforming to turn that around. We are within that reform dealing with social care. I set out the timetable to him last week in the way that he knows it's set out.
Sir Ed Davey.
Speaker, I'm continuing to be disappointed by the Prime Minister's position on social care, and I'm going to keep coming back to this issue because unless we fix it, we won't fix the NHS. But turning now to the economy, an idea for the Chancellor to grow the economy. As President-elect Trump prepares to take office next week, there are reports that a number of wealthy, high-skilled Americans are looking to come to the UK for fear of what President-elect Trump will do to their country. But because the Conservatives so broke the immigration system, many of them are finding there's no visa that they can apply for. Now, I know the Prime Minister is rightly seeking to reduce immigration from the record highs of the Conservative. But does he agree, if people like this want to come to our country, to bring their money and their skills so we can grow our economy and pay for our public services, they should be able to?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we welcome all investment into the United Kingdom, and I'm very pleased we've had record investment in the time that we've been in office and continue to welcome investors and investment to this country. But he's absolutely right. The last government lost control of immigration as they lost control of health and the economy and the borders and everything else. And it was, of course, the Leader of the Opposition who was championing the driving up of the numbers. So we will bring those numbers down. We'll get it back under control. We'll encourage investment.
Christine Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Dental deserts mean that routine dental checkups and treatment is often unavailable in local communities. In my constituency, we've had a dedicated space for a dental practice in the Blackburn Partnership Centre since 2018, but NHS Lothian has been unable to secure a dental practice. What steps will the Prime Minister take to work with devolved governments to improve access to local NHS dentists across the UK?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank you for raising this issue, and it shows the state of public services under the SNP. Mr Speaker, if you can believe it, a third of Scots struggle to access dentistry, and a quarter of Scottish children start primary school with tooth decay. That is really shocking. Clearly, there's much more the SNP should be doing. They should be ashamed. When a quarter of children are starting school with tooth decay, that is nothing to crow about. It's something to be ashamed of. Mr Speaker, here we're delivering additional 700,000 appointments, reforming the contracts, and of course we'll work with the Scottish Government to improve the health of children in Scotland.
Jim Allister.
Given President Trump's antipathy to the EU, how does the Prime Minister hope to attain a trade deal for the whole United Kingdom in circumstances where the trade laws affecting part of the United Kingdom, namely Northern Ireland, are the EU's trade laws, and in circumstances where the laws governing goods and the standards of those that can be imported are EU laws? How, in those circumstances, can a deal be obtained for the whole United Kingdom, or is the Prime Minister only interested in a deal which would apply to GB and thereby further ostracise Northern Ireland from the Union?
Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, the honourable member knows that controls apply only to EU goods moving into Great Britain. The overwhelming majority of goods moving between Northern Ireland and Great Britain will continue to enjoy unfettered access to Great Britain indefinitely. The honourable members made much of mutual enforcement. The reality is this is mutual agreement, and I know he's got his proposal, but I think his proposal would lead in the end to a hard border, and that's something that has been rejected across this House on many occasions, and for good reason.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. In the general election campaign, Labour leadership promised that if we won, we would step in and save the Grangemouth refinery, retain those jobs and invest in its future. 6 months later, this hasn't happened yet. If the refinery closes, then thousands of jobs will be lost and Scotland's national security will become massively weaker. Now that we are in power, I know that the government should use it to intervene and save the refinery jobs, protect Scotland and deliver on the promise to build Grangemouth for the future. Will the Prime Minister do that?
This is a really important point, Mr Speaker, because before July there was no plan at all to support the workers at Grangemouth. Within weeks, and importantly, we announced a £100 million deal for a growth deal, and we're jointly funding Project Willow to find a viable long-term future. It is a really serious point. I take it very seriously, and we'll do everything we can to make sure that viable long-term future is there for the workers, for their communities, and all that rely on it.
Dr. Danny Chambers.
Mr Speaker, the Russian invasion of Ukraine has led to the emergence of bacteria that are severely resistant to multiple antibiotics, and this is now seriously delaying the return of injured soldiers back to the front line. But just like Mr Putin, we know that these superbugs do not respect national borders, and it is only a matter of time until we start to detect them in our NHS hospitals, and we know that antimicrobial resistance is a huge challenge facing us at the moment. Will the Prime Minister consider supporting the Ukrainian war effort by providing rapid diagnostic tests which can be used in the field and in civilian hospitals, which will not only enable us to diagnose and treat these resistant infections more quickly, returning soldiers back to the front line more quickly, but will also provide valuable surveillance data to help global public health and protect our NHS from these dangerous bacteria?
I thank him for raising this, and he knows our support for Ukraine is ironclad. Mr Speaker, we are funding NHS doctors and nurses to work closely with their Ukrainian counterparts to share best practice, including how to prevent the spread of infections and AMR. Through the World Health Organization, we're also strengthening Ukraine's health system to provide better care, and we'll continue to do so.
Andy MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Employment Rights Bill is urgently needed, especially given the exploitation of gig workers, like those retail assistants employed through apps, with vital rights denied and staff being charged a premium should they want to be paid on time. Insecure work denies workers their rights, but the TUC has also said it costs the economy around £10 billion a year. So will the Prime Minister agree with me that having a single status of worker will help end such abusive practices, give workers security and significantly benefit the economy?
I thank him for raising this. And, Mr. Speaker, I believe everyone is entitled to fair, flexible and secure working. And that's why we introduced our Employment Rights Bill, which is the biggest upgrade to workers' rights in a generation. It includes measures that will end the scandal of fire and rehire, preventing exploitative zero-hour contracts and introducing basic rights for more workers from day one, secure wages, secure jobs and ensuring workers have the rights that they deserve at work.
Peter Bedford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Age UK Leicestershire have done a sterling job over the last few months, supporting pensioners who have lost the winter fuel payment as a result of his government's budget. They now face a staggering £400,000 increase in their costs as a result of the increase in national insurance. What advice can the Prime Minister give to charities like Age UK, who now have to decide whether to cut jobs or slash services to some of the most vulnerable in society?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the advantage, I suppose, of the Leader of the Opposition having no policies is that they can say completely contradictory things without breaching their policy. But they want the benefits of the budget, but none of the tough measures to support the budget. We have, Mr. Speaker, we've taken the decision in relation to pension credit and pension allowances, but because of our commitment to the triple lock, there will be an upgrade in April of this year of £460. But, Mr. Speaker, what I noticed that before Christmas, the Shadow Chancellor said that the triple lock is unsustainable. Unsustainable. So that's their position. Pensions going up under this government because committing to the triple lock unsustainable is their argument.
Ray Morris.
Later this month, constituency will mark the anniversary of the tragic murder of Holly Newton. Will the Prime Minister and Home Secretary look urgently at the calls from Holly's mother, Michaela Trusser, to lower the age that a person can be recognised as a victim of domestic abuse?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank the honourable member for raising this tragic case? And it is a really important issue. We've seen an increase in violence in teenage relationships in the last decade. And, Mr. Speaker, I've been continually shocked by research that shows that at a younger and younger age, there's abuse in relationships. So we do need to look at this at the earliest opportunity to how we properly protect girls. But I'm very grateful that this tragic case has been raised.
Jack.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since becoming a Labour leader, has the Prime Minister ever discussed or communicated with Philippe Sands KC about the Chagos Islands?
Yes. No, Prime Minister. I'll get him in. I'll get you in here. Right. Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. York is an incredible city, but demands on tourist destinations like York, where we received over 9 million visitors and 1.7 million overnight stays, places significant pressure on local public services and housing used as short-term holiday lets. What steps will the Prime Minister take to equip local authorities to better balance the benefits of tourism with the additional costs to our communities?
Well, Mr. Speaker, tourism is vital to our economy, and particularly in cities like York. Places can already choose to introduce a voluntary levy on overnight stays. Our focus is supporting industry, including by providing a 40% relief for retail, hospitality and leisure properties, and permanently lowering their rates from next April.
Matt Vickers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Margaret from Stockton is furious. Stockton's Labour Council are axing her weekly bin collection, scrapping free high street parking and closing her local recycling centre, all while employing a ridiculous number of people on £100,000 salaries. But she's even more furious because they're taking on another one. Behind closed doors, probably in a darkened room, they've created a new interim role for the managing director's best mate on £900 a day. It's never been approved by the council. It's never been advertised as a job. Margaret's right to be angry, isn't she, Prime Minister?
Mr. Speaker, I'm sure Margaret would be very pleased to see the incredible investment that's going in to the area, the 4,000 jobs which is growing the economy. The state of our local councils was left completely damaged after the last government. She knows that. Everybody knows that.
Graham Morris.
Thanks. You never have too many Morrises. To its credit, in its first budget, this Labour government transferred the Mine Workers Pension Scheme Investment Reserve Fund, benefiting nearly 4,000 former miners and miners' widows in my constituency. However, almost 700 British Coal Staff Superannuation Scheme pensioners in my constituency were excluded. Will the Prime Minister correct this injustice and ensure BCSS beneficiaries, many now elderly and in very poor health, are treated equally to their co-workers in the MPS?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank him for his dedicated campaigning on this issue? I am proud that this government has overturned a historic injustice, boosting the pensions of over 100,000 former mine workers. We are, Mr. Speaker, working closely with the coal staff trustees to consider their proposal, and I'll ensure the Industry Minister keeps him fully updated.
Joe Robertson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituents on the Isle of Wight are entirely reliant on foreign-owned, debt-laden, unregulated ferry companies for essential travel. But in the United Kingdom, public transport is regulated and subsidised, like buses, trains, Scottish ferries. Does the Prime Minister agree with me this Isle of Wight anomaly must come to an end? And will the government intervene in order to protect passengers from excessive ferry prices and bad services?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank him for raising this, and he's right. The ferry services for his constituents have simply not been good enough, and I know that both he and my honourable friend, the member for the Isle of Wight West, share a commitment to ensuring their constituents receive a better service. The Maritime Minister has met the ferry and hovercraft operators, the leader of the Council and other stakeholders. There will be further meetings, and I'll make sure that he is fully informed by the Minister of the progress on this issue for his constituents.
Patricia Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This year marks the 850th anniversary of my home city of Glasgow. One of the key aims of the celebration is to speed up ambitions around the City Council's grand challenge of tackling poverty and inequality and of increasing prosperity and opportunity, themes that chime very clearly with this government's agenda too. So will the Prime Minister join with me in congratulating Glasgow on this milestone, and does he agree with me that people really do make Glasgow?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank you for raising this. Glasgow is a great city, and I'm very happy to join with her in congratulating the people of Glasgow on the 850th anniversary. They have made and will continue to make a huge contribution to this country.
Jack Rankin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today marks 467 days in captivity for Avinatan Or, just one of the over 100 hostages Hamas still cruelly hold. Avinatan is my age. He has his whole life ahead of him. I felt the raw pain of his family when his mum, Ditsa, a British citizen, shared her story with me as part of the Twin a Hostage campaign. Can the Prime Minister assure me he is doing everything in his power to ensure all the hostages are returned, so Avinatan can be at home where he belongs with Ditsa and his girlfriend, Noah?
Prime Minister.
I thank him for raising this case. It's appalling that Hamas continue to detain Avinatan and other hostages, including Emily Damari, and I know he's spent time with the families, and it is nothing short of torture what they are going through, and we will do absolutely everything in our power to ensure that we make progress in bringing these hostages home, and I'm sure I speak for everybody in the House, but we will do everything to try and make sure that we get those hostages home.
Final question, Jonathan Brash.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituent, Richard Lee, has waited over 43 years for answers about the disappearance of his daughter, Catrice, from a military base in Germany in 1981. She was just 2 years old. The Royal Military Police, the MOD and successive governments have failed to get answers that he deserves, throwing up barrier after barrier to justice. Will the Prime Minister agree to meet with Richard and myself to finally give this Hartlepool veteran a way forward to uncover the truth about the disappearance of his daughter?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank him for raising this deeply distressing case, and our thoughts and sympathies are obviously with Richard Lee and his family. The Defence Serious Crime Unit, Mr. Speaker, continue to appeal for new evidence in this case, and I will make sure he has a meeting with the appropriate minister to discuss progress. Thank you.
That completes Prime Minister's questions. We'll let the front benches change over. Right, we now come to the urgent question. Dr. Neil Hudson.
Ask the Secretary of State for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs if he will make a statement on the government's emergency contingency response to the recent confirmation of foot and mouth disease in Germany.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. The whole House will be aware of the concern felt across rural communities about the potential threat of foot and mouth disease. Because foot and mouth disease is a severe, highly contagious viral disease of livestock that, as we know, can have a significant economic impact and a truly devastating effect on farming and rural communities when outbreaks occur, as we know from past history. Now, I can assure the House the UK is currently free of foot and mouth disease and has been since 2007. But following the confirmation on the 10th of January of foot and mouth disease in the German state of Brandenburg, DEFRA has taken rapid action to protect the UK, including suspending the commercial import of susceptible animals from Germany and restricting personal imports of animal products from across the European Union. And I can assure the House the government will do whatever it takes to protect our nation's farmers from the risk posed by foot and mouth. Risk levels in the UK we have increased to medium. And last night, the Chief Veterinary Officer and I spoke directly with the federal German minister and his officials. The government has taken decisive and immediate action. The import of cattle, pigs and sheep from Germany has been stopped to protect farmers and protect their livelihoods. We will not hesitate to add additional countries to the list if the disease spreads. And I can inform the House that the Chief Veterinary Officer this morning has confirmed that while Germany's surveillance continues to be ongoing, they have not as yet detected any further cases. Now, foot and mouth disease guidance is available on government.uk, and livestock farmers are urged to be extra vigilant and report any suspect disease to APHA immediately. And the UK Chief Veterinary Officer is also urging livestock keepers to remain vigilant to the clinical signs of FMD. I reiterate, there are no cases in the UK currently. I would also reassure the House that FMD poses no risk to human or food safety, but it is a highly contagious viral disease of cattle, sheep, pigs and other cloven-hoofed animals. Livestock keepers should therefore be absolutely rigorous about their biosecurity. And the government is absolutely focused on responding to the animal disease threats we face, protecting animal health and welfare. Upholding high biosecurity standards is paramount to protecting and promoting food production and food safety, both animal and human,
and support our economy and trade. And that's why we've invested a further £200 million in the UK's main research and laboratory testing facilities at Weybridge to bolster protection against animal disease. Now, whilst we stand ready to protect our livestock from the threat of foot and mouth disease and other exotic disease, we also offer our support to our European neighbours as they face this threat to their livestock, farming and rural communities. I can assure the House the Government will be decisive and take the necessary action to protect our farmers from foot and mouth disease.
Minister Dr. Neil Hudson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for granting this question. I declare a strong personal and professional interest. As a veterinary surgeon, I supervise some of the animal